MVP. When you look back at the season from hell that the Fever had, none of us expected them to be in this situation. None of us expected them to be winning a very close Game 3.
What if I told you Caitlin Clark could still make an appearance in the WNBA Finals? Sounds wild, right? 4 weeks, we've been told her season is over, that a groin injury had slammed the door shut. But thanks to a little-known wrinkle in league rules, there might actually be a way for Clark to step back onto the floor, if the Fever can reach the championship stage. Imagine it, the biggest star in women's basketball returning on the brightest stage possible. That kind of twist could flip the entire playoffs upside down. Of course, it's not that simple. The rules, the risks, and the roster shuffling, it's all part of the puzzle. Some people say it's a long shot, others think this exact scenario is why the loophole exists in the first place. Today, we're breaking it all down. What the rule actually says, why Indiana left the door cracked open, and what Clark's return would mean for their title hopes. Now let's rewind for a second. Nobody expected the Fever to be here. Coming into the season, most experts didn't even have them sniffing the playoffs. They were young, uneven, and already battling injuries. When Clark went down, it felt like their season was dead on arrival. But instead of folding, Indiana clawed its way to the semifinals, now just one step from the finals. That turnaround has been powered by Aaliyah Boston taking command, Kelsey Mitchell catching fire, and veterans like Natasha Howard and Odyssey Sims bringing stability. Even Sophie Cunningham, who wasn't expected to be a difference maker, has injected toughness and energy into this squad. This team has redefined grit. They've stolen wins they had no business grabbing, and that resilience has fans asking the same burning question. If the Fever can do this without Caitlin Clark, what happens if she comes back? The answer is simple. Indiana's ceiling doesn't just rise, it blows wide open. That's why this conversation has everyone buzzing. So why are we even here? Caitlin Clark hasn't suited up since that groin injury sidelined her weeks ago. The Fever told everyone her regular season was over, and naturally, most assumed that meant the playoffs too. Groin injuries are unpredictable, sometimes they heal in a flash, other times they drag on. Clark only played about 13 games this season, a shocking number considering the tidal wave of hype around her debut. And for a stretch, she lived up to it, selling out arenas, driving ratings, and making Indiana the must-watch team in the league. Then came the injury, and everything seemed to collapse. But here's the twist. Groin recoveries usually run 2 to 6 weeks, depending on severity. We're now past that window. That means Clark has had time to heal, train, and maybe even prepare behind the scenes. Which raises the obvious question, if she's healthy, why not bring her back? That's where the discussion shifts from health to rules. Normally, once playoff rosters are submitted, they are locked. No hardship deals, no 7-day signings, no late free agents. What you've got is what you ride with. But buried in the WNBA's rulebook is a clause that allows teams to activate players already under contract but sitting inactive, whether it's injury, suspension, or maternity leave. And yes, that applies to Caitlin Clark. She's not a free agent. She's not outside the system. She's under contract, part of Indiana's roster. Which means, technically, the Fever could slide her back in under the right conditions. Now, don't get carried away, exceptions are rare. The league doesn't just hand them out. But the fact that the language even exists means this isn't a fantasy. There's a legitimate route for Clark to return in the finals despite the roster deadline. That's the wrinkle that has fans buzzing. So why does this loophole matter? Because it proves Clark's season isn't 100% over. Being on the inactive list keeps her eligible if certain boxes are checked. That's a completely different situation than hardship contracts, which vanish once the regular season ends. And what makes it fascinating is how rare this is. Almost no players of Clark's caliber have ever been in this exact position, signed, injured, but potentially able to re-emerge on the league's biggest stage, which leaves Indiana with a brutal decision. Do they gamble on their superstar? Or protect the roster that clawed its way here? Bringing back a player cold off an injury is always risky. She might not be in shape, the chemistry could break, and yes, re-injury is a real threat. But the flip side? Even at 60%, Caitlin Clark is a weapon. Her shooting stretches defenses. Her passing creates lanes. Her competitive fire lifts teammates. That kind of presence doesn't just help, it changes everything. Suddenly, Indiana has a puncher's chance against anyone, even the defending champs. And here's the eyebrow raiser. The Fever only submitted 11 players for their playoff roster. Teams can carry 12. Why leave a spot open? Some believe it wasn't an accident, that Indiana deliberately kept one slot free, leaving the door cracked for a Clark comeback. If that's true, It means the Fever have been playing chess all along, keeping the possibility alive that their franchise star could return when the stakes are highest. So why leave that roster spot empty? If depth was the goal, Indiana could have easily filled it. Instead, they chose to roll into the playoffs with just 11, a decision that feels less like an oversight and more like strategy. It begs the question, was that slot quietly saved for Caitlin Clark? The front office hasn't said a word, but the move is suspicious enough to spark real speculation. If the Fever reach the finals and Clark walks back through that door, it could go down as one of the boldest front office gambles in WNBA history. But let's cut through the noise. Even if the rules allow it, the real issue is whether Clark's body is ready. Injuries don't magically disappear, and playoff basketball is played at an entirely different speed. Reports suggest she hasn't been practicing full speed with the team, which means conditioning could be a concern. Jumping straight into finals minutes would be a brutal test. The risk of re-injury looms large if she's rushed back. Then again, this is Caitlin Clark we're talking about. She lives for the spotlight, thrives on pressure, and has been grinding behind the scenes. Even if she hasn't been in every team drill, you know she's been working, rehabbing, and preparing like a machine. If there's even a sliver of a chance she can play, she'll push for it. The Fever have to weigh it carefully. Is she sharp enough, strong enough, and ready enough to help rather than hurt? If yes, Indiana could rewrite history. If not, it becomes one of the great what-ifs in league lore. Now picture this, Clark actually returns for the finals against the powerhouse. What if I told you Caitlin Clark could still make an appearance in the WNBA Finals? Sounds wild, right? 4 weeks, we've been told her season is over, that a groin injury had slammed the door shut. But thanks to a little-known wrinkle in league rules, there might actually be a way for Clark to step back onto the floor, if the Fever can reach the championship stage. Imagine it, the biggest star in women's basketball returning on the brightest stage possible. That kind of twist could flip the entire playoffs upside down. Of course, it's not that simple. The rules, the risks, and the roster shuffling, it's all part of the puzzle.